It's easy to kind of think like, oh, it can happen like somewhere else, like God did this, like for those people, and he's working in these ways over there. I mean, I think he'd love to do it everywhere. My name's Josh Giese.
Where are you from originally?
Originally from Ohio, in the Dayton area. My dad was a youth pastor there. But we moved a lot when I was a kid, lived in Illinois for a couple of years, and then moved to Georgetown, Kentucky, which is just north of Lexington. And then ended up coming to Asbury here in Wilmore, so.
All right. Yeah. And are you a senior, or what are you?
I'm a senior.
Oh, okay. So lead me up into however long you need to, of whatever timeline that looks like, of lead me up into the outpouring and even that, so.
I guess I'd start by saying that God had been moving in a lot of people's hearts to pray for years, like way before I even lived in Kentucky. I mean, years back, there's been groups of people praying in Wilmore for just such a long time for God to move, people praying at this campus, people praying at the seminary. I came in this year and started volunteering at a student ministry called WGM, and they wanted to start this prayer group called Furnace, is what they're going to call it, because one of the girls in our team, she got to South Africa. They had been like doing this regular prayer thing, and she's like, it's so awesome, like we got to do it here. And James, our director, was like, yeah, let's do it. I remember being in those prayer meetings and people saying stuff like just asking God to move on our campus, praying things like, do something here that only you can do, something that only you could take credit for. And I didn't even know about all the other groups of people praying around campus. A few weeks before the revival started, I even had a friend, he's like, I think we should do like a hall prayer thing. And he came to me about it because I was the RA of our hall. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we just picked a night and started doing it regularly. And then this revival breaks out. And I hear about all these other groups, and when we're like, oh, we've been praying for this, we've been praying for this, we've been praying for this. And it was really cool, because it's almost kind of humbling in a sense, because it's like, it's not like it was about my group or this group or that group. It was like God was planting all these seeds and coordinating this behind the scenes for a really long time. So yeah, it was just really, really cool, so.
Wow, yeah, so it's, everybody's taking part, like his heart's moving them to pray. That he would move, so
and people
joining
obeyed.
with him. Yeah.
And then he did what he did.
Yeah. So tell me what that was like. How'd you hear about it? Yeah, all that stuff.
Well, the first day when the revival started, it was basically just a normal chapel. And we have guest speakers come in all the time and preach. So Zach Mearcreeves, that's the name of the guy who was preaching that Wednesday, and it was just like the gospel choir was leading, and at the end of the service, like it was pretty clear, like God was speaking to some people, and people just kind of wanted to linger, like if they don't have class after, just kind of sit and pray and listen to God and continue to worship and all that stuff. But it just like kept going and going and going, and it's like the psalm where it's like better is one day in his courts than thousands elsewhere. It's like God really just showed up, and people just didn't want to leave. And it like keeps going on and on throughout the day, and I'm hearing about it. And I left after chapel. I went to class, and then I went to lunch, and then I went to my next class. And when I'm in my music class, this guy just comes in, and he's like, I think you guys should come into Hughes. Because I don't even really know what's happening, but it's really special. Like people were up there confessing all these like sins that they had been keeping in private, people talking about how they had been running from God, or people talking about how they were mad at God or hated him, or all this stuff. Just people like talking about things that you wouldn't really say in front of a crowd, It's just like a lot of humility that people were displaying there. And people were just continuing to worship, and like, it was like people that weren't even necessarily friends with, like they're just going in there and they're just praying over everybody. And yeah, it was just really, really special. And it's almost hard I feel like I can't really do it justice, because it is something that was like, it's God's presence. It was like a supernatural thing. It wasn't like, it was some like marketing plan or something. Like, it just happened. But yeah, it was so cool. And then people from the community started showing up, and people were so excited because they're like, oh, finally, like, I've been praying for something like this to happen, for like God to open people's eyes, for him to move in their hearts. And, those first couple of days, I don't think anybody knew about all the people that were about to show up. God really he just completely blew all of our expectations out of the water. So yeah, it was so amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not very conducive to classes and stuff like that, is it?
No, but I was skipping so many classes. But all my professors were super understanding, so.
That's good.
Yeah.
I was thinking that, yeah, I know. That kind of ruins that whole system there. But how often were you there? Like, you said you were skipping classes a lot, just whenever you could,
Yeah.
or just hanging out, or did you do prayer team or anything like that? What was your involvement? I guess.
I wasn't necessarily involved in like a leadership sense, but the second day I was there pretty much most of the day, because I just didn't want to leave. And there was a lot of people that I knew that were there, like from my hall. And as the RA of my hall at the school, we kind of talk about it as being like the hall shepherd. And so there was a lot of my guys there that I was sitting with and talking with and praying with, and then a lot of people too that weren't on my hall, just like friends that wanted to like talk through things and pray. And I really saw God move a lot in those people's lives. And there was times too where God was unpacking some stuff with me. It's like I'm sitting there and I'm reading scripture and I get to this verse and I'm like, I don't want to go on this subject, Jesus. He's like, no, we're going to talk about it. So yeah, my involvement wasn't necessarily, like I said, leadership or anything, but I participated a lot. And I don't know, I just wanted to be there as much as I could, because it was like, this is something so special. Like, I've never seen God do something like this before. So it's like, why would I want to do anything else right now? Especially if my professors are pushing back deadlines and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, this is more important. So
yeah, just get in there and soak it up as much as you can.
that is exactly what Zach Krebs told me the second I walked in the door. Because I know him like semi-well, not like a good, like close friend or anything like that, but he's just around campus a lot, so he knows a lot of students. And I got in there and he said, dude, just soak it up. And I took a video and I sent it to my dad, and he said, soak it up. And so that's what I did. Yeah.
Just turn into a sponge, huh?
Yeah.
So is there any, like, asking people, like, any stories that you're like, that stood out to you that, like, man, let's share that,
I think my favorite story that I heard that was just like the most like encouraging, the one that like built my faith the most, was someone was watching our chapel live stream, because they always live stream chapel, but there's usually not like that many people watching, except when people had kind of heard about what was happening, there was a lot of people watching chapel. And one of those people, well, multiple, they were missionaries in Indonesia. And they sent in this testimony like a few days after this chapel service. They said, yeah, we were watching chapel the other day, and we were wrestling with like going into this village. I think the village, they were dangerous for some reason. I don't know if they were, what it was, but they were like violent, or they were just scared to go. And they said, we watched that chapel service and we felt so empowered and encouraged by the Spirit and by like what was happening. We decided to go, and they have the whole gospel presentation, and they show that Jesus film that it doesn't use words or anything like that. And half of that village came to Christ that day. And so they're like, that revival that was happening here was like spreading in Indonesia. And when they told that story, like the place, I thought the roof was gonna like blow off. Like people were so excited to hear like just what God was doing around the world. Even just through like watching the live stream. And there's another story too that like, I heard the story and I was just like laughing because it just like made me so happy. This woman from Chile, She sold her car to get a plane ticket to come to the revival, okay? She lands in Lexington, she gets an Uber, and then she comes to Wilmore, and she invites the Uber driver in, right? He gets saved, and then she gets up there, and she starts sharing the testimony about how this Uber driver got saved because she sold her car, got the ticket, comes to the United States, and afterwards, this like random guy is just like, he goes up to someone in leadership, and he's like, hey, I need to find that woman, like, I'm gonna pay to send her home and get her a new car. And it was like, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, what is happening? I was like, this is like stories like you just can't make it up. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And yeah, there was so many people that came to Christ and like their hearts were just changed. And then, or like even people who were already believers that their eyes had just been opened up to things. Like there was one day on the green here on campus, right outside like the auditorium where everything was happening, 200 people got saved on a Saturday. And I was just like, again, I like was so overjoyed that I just started laughing. I was like, this is just insane. It was like, I realized, like, I think one thing God really taught me is like my prayers have just never been like big enough. Because he just, yeah, he really like I said before, he blew everyone's expectations out of the water. So, yeah.
Wow, your prayers weren't big enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I'm still thinking about that lady from Chile.
Yeah, it was so cool. So cool.
That's crazy. And so many things like that. You know, I've heard now of salvations and healing.
Yeah.
And just God's presence and His Spirit and convicting people.
Yeah.
And, you know, confession and
yeah.
You know, just everything that you can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, it's
it
like
was
God walking in the room and just doing what He does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And it felt like I was in like a Bible story. It like felt like when Jesus would show up in a town, and they'd be like, crowds were all over, you know, like they just show up and like people got to tear through a roof to get in the building. And it's like, it's kind of funny. It's like Jesus shows up in the 21st century and it's the same thing. It's like the fire department shows up and they're like, hey, there's way too many people here. Like you're breaking so many codes. It was just, I don't know. It was so funny. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of mentioned, you know, leaving this for you. What is it, you know, what do you feel like walking away from that is like for you? Or your ministry, you moving forward, like, man, you know?
Oh man, there's like a couple different things, to be honest. One, like you said, I kind of already mentioned that my prayers aren't big enough. I think it was like, this was really something that built my faith, and the verse that says like He is capable of like abundantly more than we can possibly ask or imagine, that verse is a little bit more real to me now, and I definitely believe it more than I ever did before. I also think He, through the whole thing, like with the different prayer groups, and then you find out about all the other different groups praying, it was like, there were so many people who were being faithful and doing what God was asking, but at the end of the day, it really was like about Him and what He was doing, and like, He really taught me like this, it's not about any of us, and like this revival didn't break out because there's a bunch of rock stars here at Asbury that are like, you know, this like different level of people than like people somewhere else, or because we have like the best professors, or like, you know, it's like there's not necessarily something super like special or like unique about Asbury where it's like, I'm basically what I'm trying to say, it could have happened anywhere else, but like He chose to do it here, and I think it's so awesome that He did that, because this is a place that's a little hidden. It's not really a place a lot of people have heard of, and it's kind of I don't know, Kentucky isn't necessarily the type of place that like people go to vacation or like visit, and it's like, wow, God is like still working in the same ways He did in like Bible times, where it's like the best king that Israel ever had was like a random shepherd boy from Bethlehem, and like in John, when I forget which disciple it is, but he tells his brother, he's like, I found the Messiah. And he's like, well, who is it? And he says, Jesus of Nazareth. And he's like, well, what good comes from Nazareth? You know, it's like that type of thing. It's just like Kentucky of all places, like a place a lot of people don't think about that's kind of hidden. And God does something amazing. And I like it. I just love that he does that, because no one can take any of the glory from him, because it was nameless, faceless, all that stuff. It was just, yeah. So I think that's also something he's taught me through all this, is that he can do like amazing things where you really don't expect it at all.
Well, I'll ask the last thing then that I've asked with each one, is that if somebody watches this, or you know that they're going to watch it, that something you would want them to hear, or you'd want them to know, whether it's about them following this or whatever it is, just, you know, whatever maybe is on your heart.
It's easy to kind of think like, oh, it can happen like somewhere else, like God did this, you know, like for those people, and he's working in these ways over there. But I think he really does have a desire to like, I think he'd love to do it everywhere, right? And there's like so many people here who really had an encounter with God and really found out that he's real. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people other places who are like, is this really like, is it real? And I'd say, yeah, like God, like he is a father who like desires a relationship with his children, a father who like doesn't abandon his kids, who provides for them. Like all these things, they're not just like stories about people super long ago in the past where it's like, well, he did it then, but he can't do it for me. It's like, no, it's like, they were just normal people in their day, and the stuff that he did in their lives and the way that he moved back then, he wants to do in us too. And so I think what I would just like want to tell people is like, that's what God is inviting you into, a relationship with him. And it is something that is actually like transformative, and there is like power and his spirit living inside of you. And it's not just like this make-believe thing that a couple people hold on to like get them through life. So, yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Well, I'd encourage you, you know, the testimony is powerful. Don't ever stop sharing the testimony, because like, you know, God put you here in this place at this time. You could have been anywhere. And I think about that when I'm listening to your stories, I'm like, wow, like God said, all right, I need Joshua right here at this time, because I'm going to mark him with this thing. Yeah. And I in my study of like revival in history, is that there's always a testimony that says God can do it in you. And then there's always a response, and that's that people get hungry and they pray.
Yeah.
And so like I hear you and I'm like, don't stop sharing it, because you don't know what you're going to spark in somebody else.